Ben, on Friday, Kwesi was let go by the Minnesota Vikings. Your thoughts?
Yes, he was. Not surprised. Yeah, go ahead.
But you were surprised when it happened, I'm guessing, right? No, really? Why didn't you give us a heads up?
In what way? I'll say that I'm not as I'm not as confused by the timing of all this as everybody else.
Oh, okay.
I just like a lot of the beat writers have already said, I had heard rumors for several weeks, and so I thought it was actually going to happen several weeks ago. And so when it actually did happen, I was like, oh, they're going all the way through. They're actually going to do this. So it wasn't a huge surprise. I know a lot of people are saying, well, what's up with the timing? I mean, not every decision has to be made the second the season's over. And yeah, it is a little bizarre that he was just at the Senior Bowl. But I think that we all probably understand with the NFL calendar the way it is, there's never, quote unquote, a good time to fire anybody in that situation. So I don't think the timing's all that bad. And I think there's one thing that I've learned about being around the Vikings franchise under the Wilf ownership, which is that's truly all I've known. But they're very thorough with a lot of their big decisions. They do a lot of due diligence. So when the season's over and Mark and Ziggy don't live here full time, they're not in the building every single day. It doesn't surprise me that they want to really get a handle and a grasp on what's going on in from a microscopic level to a 360, 10,000 foot level. They want to get the vibe and the feel of everything if they're going to make a huge decision like this. So to me, it seems like they probably just went through weeks and weeks of just analyzing, talking to people, interviewing people, trying to get a direction of where the team is going and who's going to be the leader under that new direction. So to me, it's this is kind of how they do business. They don't make snap emotional decisions. They make long, sort of very calculated, well thought out decisions. So I don't think the timing to me was all that surprising, nor do I think the decision to let him go based on the way you guys started the show. It's draft picks, it's this and that. It's not just one thing, but because everybody's talking about his time away and his paternity leave and all this other stuff. Those are all small factors in it. Obviously, his number one job is to build a championship roster. And I think that we all know that his best efforts wasn't good enough. So we gave him a long enough runway to see if it was going to work, and it hasn't worked. So you got to move on. I don't know. It's a huge news story. I don't think the timing's a huge deal, and I think we all of us collectively probably expected something like this to happen.
Questions.
Yes.
Number one, when somebody's fired, I don't know, maybe I'm overstating this after what you just said, but predominantly because how bad the drafts have been, how can only one person get fired? Do you understand my question? I'm not calling for anybody's head. I'm just saying Kwesi's job is to hire people to make decisions based on what they see on the field.
Yeah.
He's not he's by his own admission. He's not the football guy, right? So if he's depending on other people to tell him who the best possible option is in all of those draft picks, how can it be solely his responsibility?
Well, that's a fair question. I mean, and who knows the roles? They don't have to make announcement on internal roles that are going to be adjusted.
Okay.
If he built a team of analytic scouts, then maybe some of those guys are just going to be shuffled down the totem pole. They don't have to make an official statement saying these three guys that were closest to him or these three guys in charge that he brought on are going to be fired. They could just sort of take a lesser role or get a lesser voice until the time is right where they get a new GM and then he gets his own staff in. So that's kind of my thought on the whole thing is yeah, I agree. The buck has to stop with head coach and completely. GM and all that stuff, no matter what. In certain operations. and for his role, he had to go, and he has to take the fall. Now, the guys that worked underneath him, I don't know. I don't know how Brzezinski is going to handle that. I think that's a fair question to ask, and I also think it's fair that the Vikings don't necessarily have to be public with that. They can just say, hey, Rob's going to take over. He's got a wealth of experience in knowing the process, and I think that they're going to lean heavily on KOC and B-Flow throughout this whole thing. That is not only my thought going forward for this draft, but also like it would be my slight concern if Brzezinski did take over, which I'm a big fan of, but I just don't know how much you want to lean on the coordinators, the head coach and defensive coordinator in that capacity going forward, because it's a lot to handle. And I know that they are a part of the evaluating process, but to be like part of the front office, I don't know if they want to like shift their attention in the offseason to that versus what their job is to do.
Interesting.
You know, like when a team has a super defensive-minded head coach, and then that person gets fired, it almost always swings the other way, right? Then an offensive guy gets hired next, and vice versa. The pendulum swings the other way because you feel like you have to correct the wrongs. I feel like the same thing's going to happen here with Kwesi because he is, on a scale of 0 to 100, analytics versus football instinct. He's in the 90-something percentile, right? He's analytics and very little football.
Yeah.
Now, the opposite, you don't want the opposite either. You don't want all football, no analytics. There's a happy medium or some kind of 60-40 split one way or the other. But I think the Vikings probably learned their lesson that we can't just have some Ivy League level analytics guy come in and understand that and is probably the smartest guy in the room, but doesn't quite have the football sense. You got to have both. We've talked about that in sports forever, right? Who was the Chargers guy? Brandon Staley, right?
Yeah.
Staley was all analytics, didn't seem to have the football gut, right? Just you have like the Dan Campbells who still go for it all the time on fourth down, but once in a while still have the common sense football strategy. Everybody in sports is embracing analytics the last, 10, 20 years. You have to be able to balance both. You have to have full understanding of analytics and game theory, but you still have to understand the game and have human, maybe the best example is a baseball manager after like 2 rotations. Every baseball manager in the world that understands analytics knows that when a batter gets to see a pitcher like the 3rd time, how much better they do, right? So, but it's still, you have to be able to look at the pitcher on the mound and go, I trust my guy. My guys can still. We talked to Pablo Lopez a week and a half ago. Like, you have to know that your manager's like, I can feel it, I can see it, I trust in you. Screw the analytics, let's do this. All I'm saying, this is my long-winded way of saying, I think. Thank you. I think Kwesi is going to be the Vikings' example to swing the pendulum back towards. We have to have a football guy.
I agree.
Be the general manager.
Well, the Twins,
has to
your point, just hired Wally the Beer Man to be their new president.
See, now that's pendulum swinging way too far because Falvey was all analytics.
He's a baseball guy.
Wally's a pure baseball guy. Impossible question, but doesn't it have to be somewhere in that 60-40 range either way? You got to know both. This guy, you can't have it be all analytics.
When the story comes out that Kwesi had to be told by KOC before the Hawkinson trade how a tight end of his caliber can be beneficial to this offense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I could like of all of the little things that all the little stories that have come out, if that's true, I mean, I hope to God the pendulum swings so far the other way.
Yeah.
How do you not understand that?
I hadn't heard that. Is that new? Did I miss
that?
That
Is something that that is something I read just over the weekend.
Whoa.
Well, and I think that was exactly what you said, Ben, when the trade happened. Why are you adding this kind of offensive weapon to this kind of offense, right?
Yes.
Well, by the way, can we go back to the first trade? Like, think if you don't know the difference between Kyle Hamilton and Louis Cine, right? From a football perspective, then you can run all the analytics and all the programs and solvers in the world to try to figure out, well, if we move down 20 spots, is this player worth it? Well, but if you can't see it with your own eyes or don't know how each of them is going to fit into the scheme, then how can you even process the analytics that you're trying to, calculate? I don't understand how that works.
I'm oversimplifying, but Ben, but again, back to my people underneath you have to do their job. I don't know anything about every player, but I can read a fantasy football guide and do an NFL, a fantasy football draft. You know what I mean? Tell me who's good and who I should pick. That's your job. Tell me who's good.
Yeah. No, I know. There's in hindsight now, there's so many questions. Like, I understand the initial hire was like, let's just do something a little different and let's see if we can be progressive and cutting edge. It works in other sports. I think it's worked in other capacities within the NFL. The NFL seems like it's going more towards a numbers-based game. Let's see if we can make this work.
I agree.
And again, I think to Corey, your point is that fine if you want to take that approach, but on the spectrum, it doesn't have to go all the way to 10. Like, we don't have to go all analytics and no football intuition,
right,
and no football instincts. So do I think it's going to swing the other way? Yeah, but again, going back to what I said about the timing of the firing, I do think they're going to not just go like, we're going to go for the biggest meathead GM that we can find.
Right.
You know, there has to be some sort of balance between, okay, this guy understands the current state of the modern NFL and how that blends, but he also has to know how an athletic tight end can fit into this offense and not have to sit down with the head coach and ask him like, hey, dude, like, does a guy like this, is it going to fit in your offense? Like, no, you just should know that. Now, I mean, still, I think maybe not a great decision on his part, but just adding that type of player, how can it not help this offense? You know, like, how is it not sort of the missing piece? How do you not look at what the Rams were doing and the way they use their tight ends and the way that McVay uses his tight ends in the system? Not saying that everything's apples to apples, and obviously KOC was going to have his own spin on that type of offense, but like, it's not going to deviate so far away that you wouldn't need a good tight end. So there are little stories like that along the way. I'm like, man, like, he just was too far behind the 8 ball and getting caught up. And then just like when KOC took over the job and he was talking about how he's drinking from a fire hose, like trying to put his staff together and the Super Bowl run and all this other stuff, like it sounds like the guy didn't sleep for a full year. I can imagine the same things for Kwesi, but then you got to think about like, now I have to learn football. What? Like, that shouldn't be a part of the content that's coming out of the fire hose. That should be
pretty tired.
That should just be what you should just know, and then building the team and the process of building a team underneath you and all of that internal stuff should be the part that's like really overwhelming.
And lastly, when you look at what the situation this team is currently in, why that new regime was brought in was to get them under the cap and get a cheaper but better team. And now they're $40 million over the cap after one season of getting all these free agents because they can't hit on draft picks.
That's correct.
Now they're in a situation where all they needed to do was get rid of the Cousins contract and get, more money. Now they're $40 million over the cap. 1 year after their plan to sign all these free agents.
And maybe when it comes down to the timing, maybe that was it. Maybe they're just like, we can't let this guy draft one more time. He's basically 0 for 4. We can't let him be 0 for 5.
Well, the thing is like, when it comes to the draft stuff, I don't think, and I think you're correct, is it's not like we get immediate results on May 1st.
Yeah,
good point.
When we drafted Lewis Cine and some of these guys, on May 1st, we're like, this guy's a stud. He
Completely.
was a two-time captain at Georgia.
Still
of one of the best college defenses in a long time.
And we were talking about how all the reports of Kirby Smart and all these guys, like, they leaned on him. They're like, he's like the quarterback on the field. He's like another defensive coordinator. The guy's so smart. He's so instinctful. All of the things that we heard about Lewis Cine after the draft was this guy's going to be Kyle Hamilton-esque. Now, somewhere along the draft evaluation, they did not hit on the personality traits. They didn't hit on, does this guy love football? Is he going to push himself beyond just being a star in college to try to be a star in the NFL? Somewhere along the psychological scouting broke down because he had all the physical tools.
Until he kicked himself in the back of the head.
Yeah, and Rosie laughed.
But again, I think that's a very convenient excuse in that situation that he Yes. Was it a major hurdle that he had to get over to work his way back from a broken leg? Sure. But he was not on a track right then. He broke his leg on special teams.
Yeah.
If he's Kyle Hamilton-esque, he's not playing special teams in that situation.
Nobody would fault a GM for missing on a first rounder. It happens to
It
the
happens
best
all
of
the
them.
time.
Yeah.
And even I'm sure there's been great GMs that have a botched first draft and find their footing and figure it out. If that was the only one, we would be still super pumped.
Sure.
But it's been that, and then it's been almost nothing good since then, right? We've only had a couple of nice little finds, and even like ones like Addison come with an asterisk sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. You're like, geez, I know he's talented, but man, that's like we don't have a lot of home runs. You can't miss as often as Kwesi has missed in big ways and keep your job.